Okay, so you have an existing whole life insurance policy and you're wondering, how does one of these leveraged wealth accounts fit in? Can I have more than one? Can I roll them in? So in this video, we're going to attempt to go through and answer some of those basic questions. So the first one being, can you have more than one policy? The answer is yes. Now you are insuring your life and there's death benefits that go into that. And these are all ratios that each insurance company will figure out based on your age, your health rating, the condition that you're in, the amount of money that you are looking to contribute or is already in one of these policies, and then the death benefit component. So you can have many life insurance policies, not necessarily a limit, although there will be typically a point where you may have taken out too many policies for yourself, but that usually comes after, dozens of policies could be in place, but really depends on the individual. So with that in mind, when we look at an existing whole life policy, we'll often hear people say that, one, they feel like they got duped because they just don't like the product, or they didn't really understand it when they signed up, and they start looking through the details and they realize they have signed up for what we consider a traditional whole life policy. And if you've seen in other videos, that would necessarily mean that we are paying into a policy for our entire lives every single year, from when we start the policy until when we actually pass away. And we're mainly focused on buying that death benefit, that hedge against the risk of us passing away. Therefore, we are insuring that value. And there's only a small amount that gets contributed to cash value. The challenge with traditional whole life is you'll see that it is not really set up typically for flexible savings components. And so you'll notice that if you put $1 into that policy, as we've talked about in other videos, it can go to one of two places. So it can go one into the cash value, which is the part we care about, the equity we're building in a policy, or secondly, it can go to the premium. The premium is what goes to the insurance company. That's the expense side. And so traditional whole life insurance often is set up conversely to what's in the client's best interest, if I could put it lightly. And basically, it puts a focus on the premium piece, meaning that dollars that you put into that policy are actually going into huge pieces of the premium. So you might pay $1,000 in there and you might not see any money show up in cash value until years 10 or years 15. So there's a very far out break even point. And that break even is where when you put $1 in, you actually see $1 in cash value. So you pay into the premium and you actually get what you put in. So you get that accumulation effect. Traditional whole life policies are not normally structured to do that. And the main reason is, to be frank, because the agents get compensated on the size of the base premium. So like we do with Leveraged Life Management, we shrink down that premium to the lowest amount possible. So let's say that you wanted the ability to put in $10,000 per year. In our case, we can typically get down your expense, the premium that you're going to put out there, down to 10% of what you would like to be able to put in on the annual basis, that maximum availability. And so that would be $1,000 per year that you would be paying as your premium. In traditional whole life, if you wanted to pay $10,000, you might have an expense, or your premium might be $10,000, meaning it's a 1-to-1 ratio. And that is very challenging for the client, but it's very good for the agent. The agent gets a commission of anywhere from 25 to up to 100% of that base premium. So they are disincentivized to make a smaller base premium because that cuts into their commission. So with us, we're focused on the client side. We want you to be able to maximize the cash value buildup and minimize the expense. So we are essentially cutting our fee down by almost 90%. So that's why you'll see a lot of traditional whole life insurance agents don't like this method, or they might say it's not feasible because it does dramatically affect the commissions. So that's piece one to consider. The second one is to think about how it is structured. So the most important part of our leveraged wealth accounts is policy design. So these policies have a lot of components. There's a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of creative things that you can do with them if you know the rules of the game. So there's things called riders, which are essentially like things you could package on, almost like exclusions or add-ons to a contract. Think of it that way, or an addendum. And that allows for certain activities to happen where you could only pay in for a certain amount of time, or maybe you just want to drop a lump sum in. Maybe you want to add more death benefit at a certain age. There's all kinds of creative pieces we could put together in this puzzle using some of these tools. But, you have to know what those tools are and you have to understand how they're put together. So, our team, we model what we build for individuals and businesses off of big banks, ultra wealthy families, and corporate America, who's been using these policies in these creative ways for more than 160 years. So, we take those principles and those rules and we position them, put the puzzle together in your best interest. So that. So just the essence of the matter is that a lot of agents in setting up traditional whole life just don't know all of those things are available. Therefore, they're not actually putting them in your plan. And so just know that going in, that there's a lot of creativity that can be done there if you know kind of all the tools that are in your tool belt. The last piece is, can you actually roll these in together? So the answer is yes, you can. There's something called a 1035 exchange, which is essentially like taking the cash value component out of one policy and moving it into another. Now, I will say this, we want to make sure that whoever you speak with agent-wise, if you feel like you don't have the ideal policy that you like, speak with the agent and do some sort of audit. Make sure you get a third party to look over the policy you currently have, explain to you in details, look at the MEC limit, look at the limitations, look at the cash value and what the premiums are. Make sure that you actually have as bad of a deal as you think, because sometimes it's not that bad and somebody did have a good structure in place. And if you've been paying into something for a very long time, sometimes it does not make sense to move the policy into a new one like a leveraged wealth account. But often it does make sense where it just hasn't been optimized. So we see very often people come to us and they say, hey, Sean, I have a policy that my parents set up for me when I was a baby, and they've been paying into it for 35 years or whatever the time period is. I think it's just traditional whole life. How can I get that cash value out? So again, you can remove or basically exchange, roll it into a new one, the cash value components. When we're paying in, you can actually, it's called a surrender value, that you can bring that amount over. Couple things to keep in mind. One, there are typically fees that the insurance company that you're removing the policy from will charge you. Sometimes it's up to 10% of the cash value that's in there. Kind of like if you take your money out of a 401k, you can get penalized in some insurance companies. So important to be aware of that. With that in mind, though, we can roll over those 1035 exchanges into other policies, and that very often can be very helpful if the old policy was not set up correctly. So we can front load some of that growth and use a lump sum from another policy to really speed up the ideal kind of leverage wealth, where we're minimizing that expense and allowing for much higher cash value. So it's all possible. It's hard to speak in generalities here. You want to make sure that you're sitting down with an agent that understands these different tools. I would welcome you guys to always book a free call as you're looking through and doing your own research, and make sure that you get a couple of different eyes on the current policy you have to make sure that it's, one, designed in your best interest. And if it's not, see what is actually possible to come out and roll into another plan.